want to talk to you about Prime Minister Narendra Modi as the leader. There was a lot of spotlight on him, given the absence of leaders from the US, China, and Russia. And that's natural, because if you remember, Indonesia hosted, then India hosted, then Brazil, and now South Africa. So 4 countries consecutively hosting from the Global South. And he has been put out there as perhaps the voice of the Global South. How much weightage would you give to this idea that there is a global leader emerging for the Global South that has the gravitas to actually push back, perhaps towards the West?
Yeah, I think, and I've written about this, the Global South is not so much a unified bloc. The attempts were made in the 50s and 60s to create one with the non-aligned movement, the G77. There was a Bandung conference in 1955. In contemporary times, the Global South is what I've called a geopolitical fact, much more than it is a unified body with a single leader. Clearly, the powers like India, Brazil, South Africa, Indonesia, these are the major Global South players. Among these, India is the largest, and it has taken many initiatives, has rediscovered its Global South identity in recent years. But I think broadly, the Global South is still a force to reckon with, because its individual member states, such as India, but also the others, are asserting themselves, have more state capacity, are able to at least influence certain actions or prevent certain adverse actions in their own regions. And by doing so, we are seeing a different sort of a dynamic than used to be seen in the 70s or 80s or even the 90s, when we had a clear unipolar order. And the United States, in the case of 70s and 80s, the US and the Soviet Union really ran the show, and their core allies. Now there are these other middle powers, and India obviously being the most prominent one, these powers are able to assert themselves and at least create some constraints on the great powers to a degree.
And how do you view the fact that you had the leaders of both India and Canada renegotiating their conversation around relationships to such an extent that we could have a renegotiation of trade ties? We've seen that thawing since June, since the G7, which Canada was hosting, and then the Canadian foreign minister arriving in New Delhi to meet the Prime Minister last month. But this is significant because of the recent diplomatic spat that happened between India and Canada.
Yeah, I think it's a welcome example of pragmatism reasserting itself. I think in a time where the global system is rocked by many stresses, of course we are seeing a war in Ukraine, we are seeing Chinese incursions in the South China Sea, we are seeing the United States sort of pulling back from global norms and international law in some cases. It's the middle powers of the Global South, but also in Europe, in the case of North America, Canada, that are starting to find each other and starting to see if they can diversify relations beyond the great powers. And this is very much an early stage process at the moment. We'll see where it goes. But the process has been engaged.
Final question for you, sir. Speaking at the opening of the summit, French President Emmanuel Macron, he said, and I quote, "We are struggling to resolve major crises together around this table." He also said the G20 may be coming to the end of a cycle. I just want to get your view on whether this is overstated, given the US will, bring a lot of energy next year as its host. So what's your take?
It's the end of a cycle. I suppose he meant the Global South leadership for the last 4 years. And now we move to the United States and the UK and other states that are not in the Global South. I think that's healthy. I think that the fact is that for a kind of a space that aims to prevent crises or manage them and act as a sort of a thin coordinating body for global challenges, you need both the Global North and the Global South. You need middle powers and the great powers, all of them working together. And so the US taking over next year is going to be an important landmark, because it will be forced to engage with all these countries and put its priorities on the table, and we'll see what happens, what comes out of that.